Heroes of the City of Man, pages 252 to 262.
And 6-7.
Not 6-7.
6-7.
The Fury of Hell, books 7 through 9. Throughout the Aeneid, the thematic conflict is between the various forces allied with fate and those allied with madness or furor. Beginning in Book 7, as mentioned above, this conflict is carried out on a different plane. Books 1 through 6 trace the conflict between pietas and furor within Aeneas himself. His piety is tested by the various false homes and particularly by the love of Dido. At the end of his Odyssey, however, Aeneas finally deals with his Trojan past and embraces his Roman future. From this point, the conflict is no longer within the hero, but now takes place on a public forum in the Italian War. For this reason, Virgil considers the second half of the epic to be a greater work. Were Virgil writing the Proverbs, the comparison of Proverbs 16:32, he who rules his spirit is better than he who captures a city, would apparently have been reversed. For this public and military setting in Aeneid 7 through 12, Virgil draws on the first Homeric epic. As we saw above, the Sibyl predicted the Iliad situation of the latter part of the Aeneid. Beginning in Book 7, we find ourselves in the midst of another Trojan War. Since this marks the beginning of a new stage of the epic, Virgil again invokes the Muse. And again we shall see Juno stirring up a storm, this time not on the sea, but among the people of Italy. Armies of men again fight over a woman, and again we see warriors killing, warriors killed, and hear the mingled cries of anguish and exultation. Yet Virgil continues the Odyssean themes as well. Reading books 7 through 12 through the lens of the Odyssey, we have the following correlations. Aeneas is a new Odysseus, Lavinia a new Penelope, and Turnus the false suitor that Aeneas must overcome. From this Odyssean perspective, moreover, Aeneas' coming to Italy is a nostos, a homecoming. Early in the epic, Apollo tells the Trojans to go to the self-same land that bore you from your primal parent stock, which Anchises initially thinks is Crete. When they stop at the island of the Harpies, they are again told that they are going to their fatherland, and the Harpies prophesy that once they arrive, they will grind your tables with your teeth. As told by the Harpies, the prophecy is sinister, but the fulfillment is more positive. As they sit for their first meal on the shores of Italy, they must use bread for plates, and once finished with everything else, they eat the bread. Ascanius finds it humorous. Look how we've devoured our tables even. Though meant playfully, it reminds Aeneas of a prophecy repeated to him by Anchises. When the time comes that hunger on a strange coast urges you, when food has failed to eat your very tables, then you may look for home. Pious Aeneas leads the people in a feast of homecoming, and sends a delegation to speak to King Latinus. While he marked his line of walls with a low trench, they toiled away to deepen it, to throw an earthwork up with palisades, camp-style around that post. We have seen Aeneas sending delegations and building before, most notably, in Carthage. This time, though, he builds in the Promised Land. Like Abraham, Aeneas comes to a land he has never seen and calls it home. Aeneas' arrival also fulfills another prophecy. Faunus, King Latinus' father, has warned him not to give Lavinia, his daughter, to an Italian husband. Rather, men from abroad will come and be your sons by marriage, men who will eventually rule as far as on his rounds the sun looks down on ocean, east or west. A warning that Latinus has piously heeded. When Aeneas arrives, he recognizes him as a new Odysseus, the long-awaited husband. This prospect of marriage is important to Virgil. While he wants to show that Rome descended from Troy, he also wants to indicate that the native Latins made their contribution to Roman character. A purely Trojan people is Eastern and has to be mixed with the hardy stock of a Western race before it can produce the world-dominating Romans. A marriage of Aeneas and Lavinia is a marriage not only of Trojans and Latins, but of Orient and Occident. Aeneas is awaited for political reasons as well. During his visit to Evander in Book 8, Aeneas is told about the tyrant, Mezentius, who has been oppressing the city of Agilia. When the men of the city arise against a tyrant, they are warned to stop. A soothsayer of great age holds them all back, forewarning them, picked men of Maeonia flower and heart of an old heroic race, though justly moved by your past suffering against your enemy, and though Mezentius fires you with rightful anger, no Italian may have command of this great people's cause. Choose leaders from abroad. Overthrowing Mezentius is a job for a Roman called to impose the rule of law and battle down the proud. Our examination of the Odyssean elements of Aeneid 7 through 12 has led us into the Iliadic features, which are more elaborately developed. To understand Virgil's use of the Iliad, however, we must recognize a variety of ways in which the situation in Italy is characterized. On the one hand, Juno sees Aeneas as another Paris. Hecuba's not the only one who carried a burning brand within her and bore a son, whose marriage fired a city. So it is with Venus's child, a Paris once again, a funeral torch again for Troy reborn. The situation is also similar to Aeneas' stay in Carthage, with Lavinia standing in for Dido and Turnus for Dido's rejected suitor, Iarbas. From Juno's perspective, Virgil's main characters match up with Homer's. Aeneas is a new Paris, Lavinia a new Helen, and Turnus an aggrieved Menelaus and an avenging Achilles. We have no reason, however, to trust Juno on this point. She thinks every Trojan is a Paris. From the beginning of Aeneas' approaches to Latinus, it is clear that the characters do not fit into Juno's slot so snugly. Lavinia is not, after all, either married to Turnus nor engaged to him, and Aeneas is a perfect gentleman throughout his courtship. As the story progresses, it becomes clear that the characters can be matched to Homeric counterparts in a very different way. Through much of the battle of Book 9, Turnus seems another Achilles. Raging and rioting, he drives the Trojans back and beats at the makeshift wall of the Trojan camp, finally setting it on fire. When the Trojan tower falls, all heaven thundering with its crash, we wonder if we are witnessing another siege and destruction of Troy. Though Turnus initially looks like a new Achilles, leading his men to destroy the new Troy, he ends up looking more like Hector, firing the Greek ships. Events play out quite differently than Juno imagined. Turnus is doomed, Hector defending his homeland, and Aeneas is Achilles and Menelaus destined to win the bride. For a time, Turnus even seems to be an Odysseus, slipping unnoticed through the open gate. Unfortunately for the Latins, Turnus has not a strategic bone in his body. He may sneak through the gate, but he has no craft, no metis. And if the thought had come to the champion to break the gate bars to admit his friends, that would have been the last day of the war. The last for the Trojans, but high rage and mindless lust for slaughter drove the passionate man against his enemies. These transformations of Homer reflect Virgil's view of war and heroism. Unlike the Greek heroes, Aeneas fights only reluctantly and defensively, only when he is attacked. Once engaged in battle, he is a formidable warrior, but his goal as a Roman warrior is the imposition of law and the establishment of peace. He does not fight for his own glory, but to ensure the future glories of Rome. Related to this, Virgil's Iliad relocates the theme of wrath that plays such a crucial role in Homer. In Book 8, Aeneas is, like Achilles, an absent hero, but Aeneas withdraws from the battle not because of wounded pride, but in order to find reinforcements for the beleaguered Trojans, motivated not by the sulking rage of Achilles, but by a typically Roman sense of public responsibility. He withdraws not in furor, but out of pietas. Wrath and rage are located not in the hero, but in the war itself. For Virgil, war is a kind of madness, a public expression of irrational fury and anger. This is evident when we examine the origins of the Trojan-Latin War. As in Book 1, Juno initiates a conflict to frustrate the Trojan plans. She sees that she has been defeated and by Aeneas, yet intends to drag out the inevitable destiny, delay it as much as she can, and cause as much grief as possible in the process. She wants to turn the proposed wedding into a funeral torch again for Troy reborn, and promises a dowry in blood to Lavinia. Just as Hecuba, Paris's mother, carried a burning brand within her and bore a son, whose marriage fired a city, so Venus's son Aeneas is a Paris once again. Juno hopes to use him to ignite a and conflagration of New Troy. I can read. Despairing of help from heaven, Juno looks for help wherever help may lie, and seeks out help from one of the furies of the underworld, Alecto. Grief's drear mistress, with her lust for war, for angers, ambushes, and crippling crimes. Even her father Pluto hates this figure. Even her hellish sisters, for her myriad faces, for her savage looks, her head alive and black with snakes. That Juno resorts to a fury is significant on several levels. We've seen several times already that Juno is a principle of chaos, and this is further strengthened here by her association with death and the underworld. Well does the Sibyl speak of Juno of the lower world. This adds yet another dimension to the chart of the opposites discussed at the beginning of this chapter. Juno, feminine, Furor, and Rome's enemies are all associated within the realm below, while Jupiter, masculine, Pietas, are heavenly. Inspired by Alecto, the Latins become a great sea surging against aged King Latinus. He vainly tries to stand against their furor, but, being no Neptune, he eventually shuts himself away and drops the reins of rule over the state. Aeneas, however, has been prepared for this trial. He has already triumphed over the sea, and he has already faced the terrors of the realm below and emerged again to daylight. The madness of war is also indicated by the triviality of its cause. At Carthage, Aeneas killed 7 stags, and Virgil used this hunt as an image of his inadvertent wounding of Dido. Similarly, in Book 7, Iulus inadvertently provokes the furor of the Latins. Alecto finds Ascanius hunting and sends his dogs into a fit, so that they start chasing a stag that belongs to Tyrrhus, and is treated as a pet by his daughter, Silvia. Filled with passion for the honor of the kill, Ascanius shoots a stag and it stumbles back to Silvia, who incites the men of the countryside to revenge. Stirred by Alecto, the Latins turn their plowshares to swords and come out against the Trojan invaders. Though Ascanius' act is inadvertent, it is not accidental that he does it while impassioned for honor. He's acting like a Homeric hero, and Virgil believes that when people act that way, the gates of war are about to burst. This war, particularly, is sheer madness. For starters, it was sacrilegious. Not only does it violate the will of Jupiter and the determination of fate, but it breaks a truce. Before Alecto gets busy whipping Amata into her frenzy, Latinus has already declared that he will give Lavinia to Aeneas. Your king's a man called for by fate, so I conclude, and so wish, if there is truth in what I presage, and he has sealed this offer with a generous assortment of gifts. Most importantly, the war is a fit of irrational discordia. Not merely war, but civil war. Alecto's rampage arouses discord within the royal house of Latium, setting Amata and Turnus against Latinus. Eventually, moreover, Trojans and Latins are destined to be woven into a single people, so their conflict is between future brothers. By suppressing this conflict and restoring the order of peace, Aeneas is a prototype of Augustus, who brought an end to the century of discordia. From Virgil's perspective, Homeric lust for glory is a part of the madness of war. Virgil's challenge to the Homeric heroic model is also seen in his attitude toward plunder. As we noted in chapters 2 and 3, heroes increase their reputation not only by showing prowess in battle, but also by collecting a hoard of booty. In the Aeneid, however, everyone who seeks plunder pays dearly for it. The Nisus and Euryalus episode is an example of sacrifice, but also the dangers of plundering. Euryalus is found out by the Latins because he cannot resist taking a shiny helmet. In Book 11, the Amazon Camilla fights skillfully, but she fails with her attention when her attention is arrested by a pretty bauble. These minor episodes of plundering form a context for evaluating Turnus' error in taking the belt from the dead body of Pallas. As with Camilla, taking plunder costs Turnus his life. The actions of Turnus also indicate Virgil's skepticism about Achillean rage. As he attacks the makeshift walls of New Troy, Turnus boasts his superiority to the Greek hero. Did they not see the walls of Troy, built up by Neptune's hand, collapsed in flames? Which one of you picked men is ready with his blade to breach their wall and rush their flustered camp with me? I need no arms from Vulcan nor 1,000 ships to take these Trojans on. Like Achilles, high rage and mindless lust for slaughter drove the passionate man against his enemies. But his furor leads him into fatal errors. He lays an ambush for Aeneas, but gives up waiting just before Aeneas passes. And in the definitive battle with Aeneas, he picks up the wrong sword. Homeric fury is ineffective on the shores of Italy. More subtly, Virgil shows the inconclusiveness of war when fought according to pure Homeric ideals. Book 9 tells of the nighttime raid of Nisus and Euryalus and the Aristeia of Turnus, but neither of these episodes decides the outcome of the war. Nisus and Euryalus end up dead, and in his Achillean rage, Turnus acts foolishly. Something more than heroic prowess is needed if discord is to yield to peace. That something is the pietas of Aeneas. Book 8 is an interlude between the outbreak of war and its continuation in Book 9, but it is a crucial interlude in several ways. First, like Book 6, it provides glimpses of the future of Rome, which come at the beginning and end of the book. Aeneas at the future site of Rome. Alliance with Evander, the shield of Aeneas depicting the future of Rome. Evander's kingdom is in the location where the city of Rome will be built. He is founder and aware of Rome's great citadel, and he shows Aeneas the altar and the gate the Romans call Carmental, the wood that Romulus would make a place of refuge, and finally takes him to our Tarpeian site and capital, all golden now, in those days tangled, wild with underbrush. Though Aeneas will never build a city here, his presence associates him with its greatness. In Virgil's Iliad, further, Evander is the focus of Aeneas's pietas, fulfilling the role vacated by the death of Anchises. When Aeneas leaves, Evander gives his son Pallas into his care, like another Ascanius, whom Aeneas is supposed to teach the arts of war. Past and future meet in Evander, and Aeneas's response to these demands will be a key test of piety. His piety. Aeneas is also being compared to a hero of the distant past, Hercules. When he first arrives at Evander's town, the people are celebrating a feast to Hercules, and Evander tells him the story of Hercules' combat with Cacus, a half-human monster that once haunted that kingdom. When the celebration is over, Evander leads Aeneas into his hut with these words: "In victory, Hercules bent for this lintel, and these royal rooms were grand enough for him. Friend, have the courage to care little for wealth, and shape yourself too to merit godhead. Do not come disdainfully into our needy home." Aeneas enters through the same portal as Hercules, just as he had followed in his footsteps through the underworld. He is a founding hero, like Hercules before him. A second glimpse of Rome's future comes from the shield of Aeneas. While Aeneas is with Evander, Venus becomes alarmed by the course of the war with the Latins, and seductively persuades her husband Vulcan to forge heavenly armor for her son. Though Juno and Turnus both see Aeneas as a new Paris, the fact that he receives armor straight from Vulcan associates him with Achilles. This throws an ironic light on Turnus' boast that he needs no armor from Vulcan to defeat Troy. Book 8 assures us there is an Achilles in Virgil's epic, but it isn't Turnus. According to Aeneas' father, the vocation of Rome is to beat down the proud and establish a peace of good order. Now his mother lays on Aeneas essentially the same burden, for the shield depicts the triumphs of Roman pietas over violence. At the very center of Aeneas' shield is the Battle of Actium, at which Augustus defeated Antony and brought peace to Rome. Augustus appears on the stern of a ship, and from his blessed brow twin flames gushed upward. And elsewhere, having defeated Antony, the emperor is shown enthroned in Rome, watching as compared races passed in long procession, paying homage. For Virgil, the wars of Rome, and especially Actium, were not mere political achievements, but ushered in a new age of peace and justice. Nearby, Vulcan pictured the deep hell of Tartarus, and above the whole scene is Actian Apollo, as Augustus triumphs at Actium. Monster forms of gods of every race and the dog god Anubis, barking, held their weapons up against our Neptune, Venus, and Minerva. Mars, engraved in steel, raged in the fight, as from high air the dire furies came, with Discord taking joy in a torn robe, and on her heels with bloody scourge Bellona. Heaven, hell, and everything between is involved in the wars and victories of Rome. Though there are cosmic references, Aeneas' shield is narrowly Roman. Achilles' shield, as Jasper Griffin has pointed out, contains nothing that identifies it as specifically Greek. The cities depicted there might have been Athens or Troy, but there is no mistaking that the scenes of Virgil's shield are Roman. This again highlights a difference between the two poets. Homer's sympathies are evenly divided between Greeks and Trojans. There is no hint that the Trojan War is a struggle of civilized Greece against a barbarian Troy. For Virgil, however, the universe revolves around Rome. When Aeneas left Troy, he was burdened with the past and leading the future by the hand. As he enters a battle that will end with the establishment of New Troy, he again bears its double burden. But the emphasis has shifted significantly. He receives his shield from his mother, and with it comes the implicit requirement to honor his parents. But Aeneas is no longer literally carrying his father. He is carrying his sons and grandsons. Honor to the past is not forsaken, but his primary duty is to realize the future. Taking up the shield means taking up upon his shoulder all the destined acts and fame as his descendants.